Hey everybody, welcome back to Business Salad, where we mix up all things business for you for free. Thanks so much for joining us on your lunch. I want to give everybody a heads up real quick. My internet is out, so I am on my phone's hotspot. If we disconnect from the live, we will jump back on and continue in a secondary one.
That is right. And we are your hosts, Steph and Katie. Today, we're going to give you some really great tips, you guys, that we are super excited about, pulling from a lot of really great resources. We are going to post all of those resources and links in the comments. And the topic for today is all about interviews, all about what is going on if people are going back into the workforce, if they are interviewing in person or on Zoom, which that is a whole lot going on. And between Steph's background and mine and these great resources, we have some awesome stuff to go over with you. Just some real good pull apart takeaways, all of that stuff for you guys. So Steph's going to be kicking us off with the perspective from really what business owners are looking for. If you want to intro that a little for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So my strength as far as a hiring manager and hiring business owner really lies in face-to-face interview. So what I'm going to be talking to you guys about is just that, what employers look for most in an interview, not just content, but actually when you're sitting with somebody and, you know, being interviewed by that hiring manager. And I think that a lot of times employees or interviewees typically go into a job interview thinking that that hiring manager is really going to focus on their experience, their education, their skills, things like that. Yeah, that too. But what we're really looking for is the stuff that we didn't put in the job listing. We want to see your demeanor, your personality, your attitude, you know, and the qualities that you possess beyond just those skills. Skills can be taught. Personality and attitude, not so much. So really important. And it's a huge list, you guys, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to narrow it down to the ones that really resonate with me as somebody who has done a lot of interviews. Okay. So, and just, I'd like to put this out there. I hate being interviewed. Like, I'm really not a good interviewee. It's awful. I know. Isn't that funny? Very relaxed and thorough as an interviewer, but I honestly don't know if I've given a good interview in my entire life. I've gotten a job, but I always walk out feeling like, man, I really botched that one. So
I doubt you did.
The first thing we're going to talk about is understand the company and what it does. And I know that sounds so basic, but it's true. One of the most annoying things is when somebody comes in and they sit down in that chair and they have no idea, honestly, what they're even interviewing for. And what's even more irritating is when we're calling to set up the interview. Got my little assistant, she's calling to book these interviews, and you say, where? Who? Because you've put in 1,000 applications and you didn't keep track of where you interviewed. That's not a good way to start off. But make sure that you research that company before you go in, at least on some high level, so you can show that you're prepared. You customized your resume, you customized your cover letter. Just put a little bit of effort into it so it doesn't look so generic. We want to see that you're actually interested in working for us and not just looking to get a job. Like, because that's really, I mean, you know, people just looking for a job are a dime a dozen. Somebody that's really interested in what they're going to be doing and how they're going to be a functioning entity in that company is important. Oh my gosh, Katie's coffee cup says Katie. That's amazing.
Sorry about that.
Is that a gun cup with your name on it?
It is. It is. There's a story about how I can't collect anymore because of my mother on this. But yes, it absolutely is.
Okay. Sorry to get off track real quick, you guys. I have a lot of Ray Dunn cookware and bakeware and mugs and all that stuff. So that's amazing. I don't have one yet. Stephanie probably doesn't fit. Okay, so all right, that's the first thing. The second thing that's really important to me personally as a hiring manager is understand your strengths. Know what you're really best at, whether that's working with the public, crunching numbers, certain applications, whatever the case may be. And it doesn't matter what that thing is, just know that you're good at it. And I feel like this is an area where a lot of people, especially who are super critical of themselves, have trouble finding that. Go ask your peers, ask your family members, ask former employers that you're hopefully on good terms with. You know, what were my strengths? What did you feel I was really good at? And get other people's input, because I'm definitely one of those folks that has a lot of trouble self-analyzing, and finding the good parts. So know your strengths. And I know that there are some employers who will say, what do you feel your greatest weakness is? That's always such a stinking tough question. It's like, I feel like that's really such a fine line to tread. What's your weakness? I don't know. I drink a lot of coffee. I'm really competitive. It's like
Totally.
a weakness, and what I think is a weakness, that's subjective. And I think that's actually a question that I do not use, because I will be able to assess your weaknesses during that probationary period, but at least be able to tell me what you're good at. Even if it's macrame, I can work with that. Let's go. The next thing is, know what accomplishments you've made on the job and in your personal life. You want to be able to share those stories of success, whether they were in previous jobs, exceeding sales quotas, or whatever the case may be. And let's say you're brand new into the workforce, okay, which I know we have all levels of employees and entrepreneurs watching and everything else. Use those accomplishments that you achieved in school, dean's list, or maybe you were super athletic and you lettered in a sport, or in your personal life, you were an Eagle Scout, or I don't know, maybe you hold some crazy Guinness Book of World Records. Just try to find something that you can use to highlight the accomplishments that you have personally. Another thing that I struggle with. And I will also say to my husband, what are some things that I've accomplished? For me, it would probably be keeping 4 humans alive, which doesn't, it's like, well, how does that translate to the workplace? No, it really does, because there are organizational skills there are delegation skills there's the ability to at least make a bowl of cereal, so there are accomplishments within those seemingly everyday things that you may not necessarily think about. The next one I've got is going to be open to learning new things. There's nothing that is more difficult to work with than somebody who comes in and you can't teach them anything. And yes, old dogs, you can learn new tricks. So don't go in with that mindset. Hiring managers like to know that you won't be resistant to change, okay? Even the way that you've done things before may not be the way that we do them, and if you are an old dog in your industry, just because it's the way things were done 25 years ago, doesn't mean that's what we're doing now. Let us teach you, and that's all we ask. You don't have to know it already, but be teachable.
Totally.
Next, be likable. And so this, to me, and I think a lot of people misinterpret this, don't be fake. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's not what I want to see. Don't put on a front. I do want to see the real you, but don't interrupt. Okay, be polite. Be warm and friendly and easygoing, and all of that is great and should be able to translate from person to person, but you don't have to front about who you are. So again, there's another fine line that you want to walk there. Mm-hmm. Know what you are looking for and have questions of your own. So don't just think about it like you're being interviewed. You want to interview that hiring manager too. And there are some great questions that you can come in with. What created the need to fill this position? What do you feel are the key skills required to succeed in this job? Mm-hmm. How does this position relate to the achievement of the overall company or the department, or even the boss's job or goals or whatever the case may be? Okay, so ask some of your own questions, and then that can also help put the interviewer at ease just a little bit, because they're not just sitting there pelting you with questions. Especially if you're like a one-word answer type of person, try to expound on your answers. If you can't, and it's really not something that can be expounded on, that's okay, but do your best. We understand that you guys are nervous coming in. It's fine. Frankly, we get nervous too. So especially if it's the first interview that we've conducted in a while, or it's a new position that we're hiring for. Hiring managers can be unsure. They think they know what they want. Sometimes they don't. And sometimes you have to show them that you are the one for that position, even if you're the more unconventional choice. Mm-hmm. Another thing that's really important, this is huge for me, is body language. Please make eye contact with me when you're talking to me. That also kind of goes back to that being polite. I think it's polite to look at somebody when you talk to them. Obviously, I think most parents, it's one of the biggest peeves with kids, right? You talk to them, they're not looking at you, AKA they're not listening. So definitely make good, strong eye contact. Don't make it a staring contest. I have enough of those with my dogs at home, but definitely when you're talking, please look at me. Yeah. And fellas, please be very conscious, especially if you have a female interviewer. Keep your eyes up, okay? If you feel your gaze straying, which happens sometimes when you talk or you're thinking, or especially if you're trying to anticipate those questions, if your gaze is going to wander, make sure it wanders up and away, okay? Regardless of how she's dressed. Try to be polite. And then again, kind of going back to, are you showing me your real self? Don't give me canned answers. It's okay to be who you are. That's what I want to see. I want to see what I'm going to get when the curtain rolls back 6 months down the road. Who is really going to be on the other side of that desk? And if you have a personality that you feel like maybe a little much, that's okay. That's okay. Yes, tone it down for your interview, but don't completely hide who you are, because I want to see that fun stuff. I was just talking to a woman yesterday who I found out later was nervous to talk to me. She was actually somebody in a completely different industry. It wasn't an interview or anything like that, but she wrote me and said, "Thank you so much for being so relaxed. Like, you really helped me be less nervous." So you never know the impact you're having on somebody else when you're casual. I mean, I started talking to her about the shows she was currently watching on Netflix. You know, something not necessarily related, but, you know, fun enough to let them know who I really am.
Mm-hmm.
And let me see what I've got on my list here, what else I've got. I might be done. Oh, yeah, one more. Just, do you have the personality to do the job? That's an important part of the interviewer's job. You know, if it calls for lots of people contact and public interactions, we don't want someone who seems especially shy. So please don't apply for a job that you don't think you have the personality for. If you're an extrovert, an extreme extrovert, and you're looking for a job in a cubicle, you're probably going to be bored. You're probably going to start bothering the people around you, looking for that extrovert contact, you know, randomly FaceTiming when you're supposed to be at work. So really be conscious of those positions that you're applying for, and not just do you have the skills, but do you have the personality to actually stick with it? Because nobody wants to see you bounce from job to job on your resume.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And that's everything I've got. So now poor Katie had to sit there and listen to me ramble through all that.
I love it.
But I have some great stuff for you on a less in-person front.
Absolutely. No, that's great. And it's always good to get the perspective of what are they looking for? What should I be thinking of? And we're going to shift for just a second to a world that has definitely consumed all of us, which is how much we are Zooming and doing things online. And so I will say I have done thousands of interviews over the last couple of years. And I would say all of 2019, I might have had a couple, I would say less than 10 video or Zoom interviews that I conducted. But then going into 2020, holy smokes, did that change. Talk about adapting everything. And I will tell you, all of these tips, I definitely can say I've seen people who don't know any of them. And I will say that it's so good now to be able to just recognize, holy smokes, these things are so important. And so what happened in 2020 is I was conducting group interviews where I'd have 20 or 30 people in a group Zoom. That has its own fun involved in that. Additionally, we do one-on-ones. The tips I'm going to go through that we pulled from everywhere, from the interview guys and Indeed and all sorts of sources. There's so many things that I saw quite a few times. I'm going to hit on those, and then some tips I'm like, yeah, that is a really good idea. So the first one is, if you are going to be having a Zoom interview and you are applying for that job, if you are not familiar with Zoom or whatever it is that you're going to be interviewing on, you're going to want to get familiar with it. You're going to want to, whether that means you get it on your computer and practice with a friend first. Some people go as far as to actually even record themselves, because there's things that you have to make sure you know what to do or what it looks like. I've had people that literally, they did not know how to get their camera to work. And one of the important things is for that interviewer to be able to see you and make it as much like a regular interview that they can. So really, between getting familiar with actually doing things on camera like this and practicing it, those are some things that are very, very important. The second thing is, when you think about a first impression, we didn't used to have to think about this back in the day, because we would just show up for an interview and that was the setting. And now the setting is whatever's behind you, right? So for example, if you look at Steph right now, nice, it's just plain, there's nothing distracting, it's very simple to see, that's a very good option because it doesn't distract from her. I'll say that if I was going to be doing an interview, I would clean a lot of the stuff I have, my decorative stuff, up to make it as distracting as it could not be, like not have it distract people. You know, too much stuff can be a little distracting. And so what I want to show with Steph here is that you can see it doesn't take away from her. I'm focused on her, versus if Steph was interviewing me right now, she might be like, what's that in the back over there? Is that a picture of a kid, or who is that, right? And so it's good to be able to make sure, if you cannot do anything about your background, you know, and it's kind of obvious that you don't want to have like your messy dining room table or something crazy. You know, you don't want to have light coming behind you, so I'm just this silhouette shadow. You know, think about what it looks like visually. And if you can't do anything about that, then there you could absolutely look at doing one of the Zoom backgrounds. I'm always careful about that because you don't want to do something cheesy, just keep it simple. But, you know, think about what they're seeing when they're looking at you. The next thing is, be aware of where your mute button is and use it as needed. So if the interviewer is talking for a bit and is going on and on, you should mute yourself. And the reason for that is any background noise, a sign of courtesy. And while they're talking, you're looking forward, you're acknowledging that you're listening, things of that nature, but use it especially if there's any sort of noises or distractions or things happening, so that you're not having any of that kind of complications going on. Another thing to think about is what your name says, especially on Zoom, what your name says. You're going to want to make sure that if you've been using Zoom for fun and you have some kind of spunky nickname or something silly on there, change it. Make sure it is your first and last name and you are just very clear on that and you have that ready so your profile is set, good to go, you're ready for your interview. They also say to do a couple of things to make sure your audio checks. I always say all of those things are just getting familiar with what you're doing. Same with making sure you have Wi-Fi or connectivity. You know, for example, today, the very first thing Steph said is she addressed that, hey, I'm having a little connectivity issues. Obviously, this isn't an interview, but you know, you want to make sure that you're in a situation where you address those things if you're concerned, and that you really try to make sure you handle that situation. It's also really good to think about if I'm doing an interview with someone and I'm the applicant, I want to make sure that if possible, I'm doing it on a computer. I'm doing it in a setting where I'm sitting at a desk, I'm looking at the camera, and I'm conducting it just like I would in an interview. Try not to use your phone unless you have propped it up and put it in a place to where it is viewing you, not holding it up like this. I've had people do interviews, they're in their car. I've had people driving, trying to interview. I've said, why don't we do this another time? What's happening? So just really being aware of, you know, that says a lot about what's going on. So be aware of that. The last couple of things I want to just mention that I thought were really, really important, and this is an interesting one, I feel myself doing this sometimes, is right now I'm looking right at the camera. Sometimes we get in the habit of trying to figure out where we should look, and it's natural for me to want to look at Steph, right? And so you can see if I want to look at Stephanie because I like talking to a human, I'm no longer looking like I'm making eye contact compared to if I'm looking up here. It's something to train yourself on. It's something I find myself doing quite a bit is I like to look at a person, not a little dot, right? And so just making sure that we're aware of that. Last couple of things I just want to mention. Lighting is just important so they can see who you are. They can see you. They can see what's going on. All of Stephanie's tips that she had apply in a virtual setting as well. All the things she said about first impressions, same on Zoom. I mean, you guys don't know if I'm wearing sweatpants or pajamas. I'm not. I'm dressed in slacks. But you don't know. That's one of the things about Zoom, right? As long as you make sure that you are looking professional for this situation, you're in a good place, making sure that you're in a good spot. Put your phone on silent, make sure that's all handled, and you know, make sure that we are treating this as an actual live interview. You wouldn't go in there with your phone on, you know, you wouldn't go in there having notifications going on. They say close out everything on your computer. You don't want something to come up there if you're sharing a screen or whatever's going on. And those are just some of the important things that you want to think about. Last thing I just want to mention is, and this is really a good tip from Steph, is once you get through your Zoom, they always want to make sure that you heard what they were saying and what's going on in the questions. Be prepared to ask questions back to that interviewer. And when you're doing that, again, to finish things up, make sure you have that eye contact, everything's there. And when you finish everything off, make sure it's off before you start yelling at the kid or screaming at the husband or whatever's going on. Make sure everything is off before that happens, as you conclude it. So much is going on now where we're doing so much on Zoom. And I sometimes feel bad when I talk to people who they don't know how to do it. They aren't familiar. Ask a friend, you know, if maybe you're a little bit older and you're not familiar with technology, reach out to someone who is, because it would be such a bummer if you were the person who should have gotten that job and you missed out over something silly like not being able to understand how Zoom works. So many times now when I talk to someone and I'm interviewing them, if they don't know how to Zoom, my concerns go beyond the interview into how are they going to be able to communicate with people moving forward that are going to want to communicate on Zoom or on video. And so just make sure we realize that things have shifted and things are a little bit different now with that. And it's an important thing to know, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And we're seeing more and more young people being hired over the people with more experience simply because of their ability and their ability to be malleable with technology. So really try to keep yourself up to date on the current technology, even if it's not something that you like. Call, like Katie said, call a family member. You know, when we bring on new agents, we make sure that we help them become familiar with the technology. We teach them how to screen share. We teach them how to hand over remote control, things like that. So, and please do not lie about your technological ability. Just be upfront, you know, and say, no, I'm not familiar with that, but I'm open to learning. Okay, that's good to know. If you tell me I hate technology, I can't do it, that's not going to go over real well. And for those of you, some of the stuff that Katie touched on, like, for example, you know, me having much more in-person experience than virtual experience, some tips from me to you. When she's talking about looking at the camera, man, I have so much trouble with that. I really want to look at you. I really want to look at myself. And I think that's a lot of times what people will do. On Zooms, especially if you're in like the gallery view, you can remove yourself from that gallery view so you're not looking at you. If you want to make sure you're looking at your camera, get a sticky note or a dot or something and put it right next to the camera. Look here, look at me, something. And I've even heard people say that they will put pictures of their friends or family members or whoever it is immediately behind the camera so they have a face to look at right there, because that's where I'm looking now is actually slightly above my camera where a photo would be. The other thing is, and this kind of goes along with the whole your name thing, make sure your name, please make sure that your thumbnail photo on Zoom is an appropriate photo.
Yeah.
And this is going to go beyond just being in an interview setting. This is somebody who, as a team member, please, you don't want other people to see inappropriate photos of you. You know, I love that people love themselves and are proud of themselves, but please remove your bikini shot. You know, whether you're a male or a female, whatever the case may be, even if you have to slap up a logo because you don't have any other photo, like mine's my logo. Katie has a beautiful picture of herself. I don't take great headshots. I don't have a headshot. My headshot's a cartoon. So, you know, whatever it is to help you. But if you guys need help with any tips on either an in-person interview, because we're starting to see some places open up, or virtual, please reach out to us. We're always here for you guys. And as Katie said, we'll put these resources in the chat for you.
Absolutely. No, that's great. And it's always good to kind of pick these things up and look into them and just kind of see what people are saying out there on this. So, you know, as always, all of you, thank you so much for joining us today, for listening in. We had a great time as always. Be sure to tune in next Friday for more talk, more business stuff on the Business Salad Show.
Yes, and be sure to find us on social at Instagram at Biz Salad Show, and we're on YouTube at Business Salad. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody. Can't wait to see you next week.